don't really know where this fascination with history came from. It might have been Back to the Future.
Get out of here.
Which also shot in L.A. County, right?
Yep.
I was always fascinated by, especially just seeing Marty in the DeLorean, driving through what it was at the mall. It's the Puente Hills Mall. Right,
Mall,
right.
Absolutely.
And then all of a sudden it becomes farmland. And I think that at an early age that got my mind going about everything used to look different, everything used to be different. And I was always just sort of curious about that.
Yeah. Yo, welcome to another episode of In a Minute with Evan Lovett, coming to you live from the IM studios in the heart of LA. And today we have with us Nathan Masters, who is not just a special guest, but it's kind of surreal for me because this is a person that I have researched has come up in my research incessantly, right? Every time I'm looking for a new story, his footsteps are essentially the path that I follow, because Nathan Masters is not just the host of PBS SoCal's Lost L.A., which is an awesome, awesome program, but he's written hundreds, if not thousands of articles about the history, the hidden histories, the legacy, the culture of Los Angeles, for KCET, Los Angeles Times, Los Angeles Magazine. But this is a student and now a teacher of Los Angeles. So Nathan Masters, thank you for coming on the show. This is really, really exciting for me.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Evan. Yeah, and just to be clear, it's hundreds, not thousands. But
I bet it's close to it. Listen, every time I'm doing my research for the episodes, sure enough, Nathan Masters' byline coming up, and I'm like, do I have any original ideas around here? Or has he covered everything? So, but thank you. And I got to give a shout to our sponsor, Culver City Toyota. Doing a great job for me. Thank you for being a sponsor. And thank you guys who have been supporting, going to see George, the sales manager over there. Don't forget, $500 in dealer cash on a new or pre-owned Toyota RAV4, Camry, Corolla, right there on Washington Boulevard in Culver City. Excellent sponsor. Please support them. And Nathan, welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm so excited.
Okay, I got a confession. I was binging Lost L.A. last night. And here's the truth. This is the confession part. I was seethingly jealous of the show because I'm like, I wanted to hate on it. Right? And I've been, for years, I've been like, this is so good. This is what I want to do. And it's excellent. If you guys haven't watched it, you need to, first of all. PBS SoCal, and we're in the midst of a new season that just dropped right now. St. Francis Dam episode is coming up, biggest disaster in Los Angeles history. Space shuttle. But he covers all of the ground. Let me get some of these. That could be before the Dodgers, reshaping LA, bootlegger tunnels that a lot of people ask about the tunnels. So let's jump right into Lost L.A.
Yeah.
Tell me what that means to you, and give I guess the bullet points on the show, because I didn't do a great job except saying how awesome it is. So tell us what it is, and then tell me what it means to you.
Yeah, so it's a public television show about LA history. There have been shows like that in the past. We took a different spin on it, right? We try to do a lot of our storytelling through the archives, right? It's actually a co-production of PBS SoCal and then the USC libraries. Right. So we bring this sort of academic expertise, and we actually have a team of researchers from USC who help us put together every episode. And we try to ground every story we tell in some sort of archival collection at a library somewhere, at a museum, or somebody's home.
And the archives. I think that is the element that really ropes me in and touches my heart. Because look, with LA in a Minute, I pride myself on doing good research. I have the little inlaid images if I'm talking about something in 1952, show a little picture. Yeah. But you guys get this high quality, and I'm struggling for these images, resolution, all this. Yeah. But here's high quality, beautiful video that I had no idea existed, images that are somehow crystal clear from a century ago. Yeah. How does that, well, first, that's such an important foundation for the show, because again, instead of just Nathan telling the story, you're seeing the history and the archives as you're telling the story. And that's part of, with the guests and everything that you're happening, that just adds such a good element and layer of not even just recreation, but telling the story. I mean, how does that all work, first of all?
Well, the archives are so important because that's the foundation for sort of most of our understanding of the past. I mean, there's the oral history, memory thread, but there's the archives are really where historians go to do their work, where, people like you and me who are not, formally trained historians, but we deal in the past. This is where we can go to find the truth. Because, online, I'm sure you've encountered this. There's a lot of misinformation online. And it's sort of this echo chamber where this piece of information will get out there and will just bounce back and forth.
Absolutely.
So we actually, we go to the primary sources to confirm everything.
Yeah.
But it's not just a show about the archives. Like we start there, but then we go out. It's sort of like a travel log show in a little bit. We try to model ourselves, strangely enough, after the Anthony Bourdain show a little bit, where we would, go out, visit interesting locations, talk to interesting people.
Can I talk about the St. Francis episode? Because it is available online. I know it hasn't technically aired. It airs tonight.
So I think that's the repeat airing. It has aired already. Yes.
Good.
Yes.
Okay. Then I want to talk about that because first of all, the St. Francis Dam collapse, largest disaster in LA history. When I quote unquote discovered it in my research and Nathan Masters' previous articles, KCT, no, I had never heard of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that kind of shocked me because, again, we know about the earthquake. There have been the floods. There have been other, but how did I not hear about something less than a century ago that killed nearly 500 people? How many billions of gallons of water were spilled? Like
12.5 billion gallons of water. Yeah, and it flowed 54 miles all the way from San Francisco Canyon to the Pacific Ocean,
which is
Ventura.
like North Santa Clarita out, and not even like the Pacific Ocean in Ventura.
Yeah.
And by the time it got to, and here's why I bring this up. Not just that it's something we all should know about, that we all should be taught, but the way this episode was put together was so awesome. And this is what makes Lost L.A. beautiful, is, as Nathan said, it's very, Anthony Bourdain meets Huell Howser, maybe. Let's call it something along those lines. They started at the Hollywood Reservoir, which is something that I thought was really cool and a good way to start the show, that particular episode, because the Hollywood Reservoir, and I had no idea, was kind of modeled after, it's a dam, obviously, that holds all the water. Yeah. And it was modeled after the San Francisco Canyon dam. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was the structural twin of the dam that collapsed, designed by the same man, William Mulholland, who was, the chief engineer of the Department of Water at the time. And it's actually fitting that we started there because, sure, most people have not heard of the St. Francis Dam disaster.
Yeah.
A lot of Angelinos don't even know about the Hollywood Reservoir. It's still one of LA's best kept secrets. It's, for tourists, the best place to see the Hollywood sign. For people who like to run or jog, amazing jogging path right around exactly 5K. I love it. And pine trees. The only downside is there's a chain link fence running around the lake. You can't get to the lake shore, but it's a magical place.
Okay, so it's funny you say that people didn't know about it. I knew the reservoir existed.
Yeah.
I didn't even comprehend that it was a dam, especially in the same vein as one of the most significant dams in LA history, infamous, if you will. And one thing that you get into is because they intentionally kind of obfuscated that fact by planting trees and landscaping and kind of hiding this beautiful, magnificent engineering accomplishment, because in the aftermath of the St. Francis Dam collapse, the people of Hollywood and the city were a little bit nervous, a little bit scared that something like that may happen to their community.
Rightly so.
Yeah, definitely. So and that's the funny thing is I didn't, you think about it logically. You're like, oh, of course it's a dam, but it doesn't appear that way to the average person just going about their day in Los Angeles.
You don't see the dam. That was a deliberate decision made by the city. Yeah. So overnight it went from, it was constructed as a civic monument to LA's water infrastructure. And the chief difference between the Hollywood Reservoir Dam and the St. Francis Dam was just all the ornamentation. the Hollywood Dam was, it had these beautiful bear heads. It was a pretty thing to look at. It was meant to be a monument, but overnight it went from being something to be proud of to something to hide. So the city literally covered it up with dirt, landscaping. They also lowered the water level, which did a lot more.
And in the episode, by the way, they're showing this in the episode in these archival videos and photos of the process of when it was this beautiful ornamental dam to them literally lowering the water, packing it with dirt, like building stuff up and around it so you can't even see it. And today, can I go look at the beauty if I'm out? I know you said it's a great place to run around, do a hike, but can you really grasp the beauty of it at this point, do you think? Different kind of beauty with the trees, but the dam itself.
In person, yes. So it used to be something that you would, if you were standing in Hollywood, if you're standing in a lot of the LA basin, you'd be able to see this glimmering white dam up in the Hollywood
photos.
Hills.
Watch this episode because some of those photos, right? Go on.
But go there in person. You walk along the dam. That jogging path I mentioned goes over the dam.
But over it, can you tell the beauty and the magnificence and the ornamentation?
Yeah. You can look down, and there's also this plaque dedicating the dam to William Mulholland.
Was it called it was called the Mulholland Dam?
It was. I think it might officially still be the Mulholland Dam. It is named after him. Okay. Yeah, I don't think they use that. Not that they're ashamed of Mulholland anymore, right? But in the years after the St. Francis disaster, they started to use Mulholland's name a little less.
I'm gonna get to the episode because I want to take you through why Lost L.A. is so special. But I gotta ask you because you're somebody who I know will know or have a great take on this. Mulholland is one of the most polarizing figures in LA, right? History, by the way. Some say he's the godfather of the city. I mean, without Mulholland, we don't have water and we don't have a city.
Yeah.
But with this legacy of, again, the greatest disaster, literal blood on his hands, inspected the dam personally in St. Francis before it collapsed, gave it the okay. Where do you think his legacy lies? Because he is, whether or not positive or negative, he is very important to the history and development of Los Angeles. So
nobody should deny that, right?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I come down on more the Godfather side. Of course, the St. Francis Dam disaster is a huge mark against him. Right. So is the ecological disaster in the Owens Valley, right?
That's the big.
You can attribute that to him. You can attribute that to the city of LA. He's certainly responsible in part for that. I think I might have said this in the show. The truth is about Mulholland, there wasn't a shred of evil in his personal character, right? And this is something that a lot of people conflate William Mulholland with Noah Cross in Chinatown. Chinatown is one of the greatest films made about LA, and it shapes all of our thinking about the city and especially about its water wars, water infrastructure. Yeah. Mulholland, wasn't personally corrupt, wasn't personally evil. He was always thinking about how to advance LA forward, how to plan for the future.
Focused. Yeah, absolutely.
And he was an incredible, so he had a huge failure, obviously, but also an incredible engineer, right? He designed personally the aqueduct system, and he famously never had any sort of blueprints.
Yeah.
He kept
no formal training.
Self-taught engineer, and he remembered where every single bolt was in the aqueduct. It was all in his head. It was never written down. Wow. I mean, a really impressive guy.
Okay. I didn't know that. So again, tough legacy, but hey, we're here because of him, and Mulholland Drive every day we can walk in, appreciate. So back to the episode, and this is what I want to kind of elaborate on. So you go from there, Hollywood Reservoir, which again is just like an interesting place to start when you're talking about this disaster, because you're like right here at our fingertip, right here, and we're walking on essentially the twin of the dam that collapsed. Then you guys go up to the aqueduct, the Cascades in Sylmar, right? And I've talked about that a lot. I grew up in the Valley. So for us, it was the water slide that we would pass when, you're going to Magic Mountain or you're going on a road trip up north or something. And kid, you don't really realize, the aqueduct and its importance and everything. But you go up there, you talk about, there it is, take it, which was Mulholland's famous quote.
Legendary.
A man of few words. But it's just a great progression, almost, I don't want to say backwards really, but it's kind of the way that you guys are putting that show together, and then you work your way up to the ruins of the St. Francis Dam. And I went up there for an episode a couple years ago, and it really is haunting up there. It's this huge canyon. You'll probably do it better justice, but it's a huge canyon with not ruins in the traditional sense, maybe that you're thinking, but big rock formations that you come to realize they're not rock formations. They're remnants of this huge dam that burst and collapsed. And the water was so powerful that it carried multiple ton structures nearly miles. And anyway, it's all around in the remnants. What did you think? Had you been to that canyon before?
Yeah, a couple times.
Okay, what are your thoughts just being there and kind of the aftermath and everything up there, first of all?
So if you know the story, excuse me.
And by the way, fill in any holes or gaps and don't hesitate to correct me on anything, by the way, because we want to be accurate here. Yeah.
Yeah, if you know the story, it's haunting.
Yeah.
The thing is, there's, as of right now, there is no visitor infrastructure there. There are no interpretive signs. There's not even a sign on the roadway saying, hey, this is the site of one of the greatest civil engineering disasters in U.S. history. There's nothing that helps you make sense of what you're seeing. So this giant concrete block, the size of a small house that was carried a quarter mile downstream, a big house.
Yeah, right.
You look at that from the highway, you look at that 100 yards away, you won't know that it's concrete. You have to get up close. You see, there's steps built into this rock. Yeah. There's rebar sticking up out of it. This is part of the dam.
Yeah.
But unless you're an intrepid explorer, unless you're with a guide, you're not going to know what you're looking at. And thankfully, that is one of California's newest national monuments. It was made a national monument around, I think, 2000, part of a congressional bill. So they are working, the Forest Service and a nonprofit that partnering with the Forest Service, they're working to fix that. In fact, when we were there for that shoot, there were Forest Service employees scouting a trail up to the west dike of the dam, which you can still, which has, everything's been unfortunately dynamited.
Yeah, I saw that in the episode. Absolutely. I saw the video of them dynamiting where I'm like, I can't believe this exists, much less that you were able to pull that footage.
I mean, we have a crack research team, archival sourcing team. They find the most amazing stuff. Yeah.
Were you in the actual spot where the tombstone piece was?
Yeah, the interview we did with Dr. Lucy Jones, right? L.A. legend, right?
Again, I was so jealous. L.A. legend.
Yes.
Unfortunately, Lucy Jones, by the way, I don't want to say unfortunately, she probably has her most renown as, the seismology. That's not even the word.
She was called the Earthquake Lady.
There you go. Okay,
but I don't know if she uses that herself.
Every time there's earthquakes, she is the go-to expert. And you see her, unfortunately, only when something happens. So I was so glad to see her during something which again is reflective of a disaster, but in kind of a more natural context, which was really, really cool. But go on with the tombstone. And by the way, for the tombstone, I'm hoping we can inlay a photo here on the video. But when the dam collapsed, the biggest visual remnant, was this huge, massive structure, just a part of the dam that did not collapse, that is reminiscent of a tombstone. We're talking, 100+ feet tall. I can't even
However tall the dam was, it was a vertical section of the dam from the base to the top that, for whatever reason, that part stayed
as a literal tombstone. So go on. So you went to that.
So we went there with Lucy Jones. And by the way, so since she's retired from Caltech, she now focuses on, she works with city government, county government to help LA make itself a little bit more resilient to future disasters. So it was perfect to have her there. Yeah. So we did this interview with her, an archaeologist with the state parks, and Stansel. Right. And my buddy on this episode and road trip, my friend Jeff Mano, who's a great architecture writer, did Building Blog. Anyway, we did this scene up there where we were standing on the remnants of the tombstone. I don't think we actually mentioned that in the episode, but that's what we were standing on. It was shortly after the disaster, it became all of a sudden this huge tourist destination. People wanted to come see the disaster site for themselves. And maybe about a year later, there were a couple of teenagers horsing around, climbing the tombstone. One of them died. And so the city said, well, we gotta blow it up.
Disaster tourism, I don't want to go on a tangent, but again, after the fires, people were like, I got to get up there and see. And it's a weird human curiosity, like the morbid curiosity. It's terrible, but I get it. So on that episode, so then they go, so it was Hollywood Reservoir to the aqueduct to the site of the dam collapse,
Yeah.
over to Fillmore,
Yeah.
which was one of the cities that was inundated and nearly destroyed as a result. 19 miles away or something, wasn't it?
Something like that, about half the way to the Pacific. Yeah.
And again, just seeing the devastation okay, so apparently it was a 10-story wall of water when the dam collapsed, right? So 100 feet, if you will. By the time it got to Fillmore, 19 miles away, it was still a 40-foot wall of water. So just think about the destruction that lies in that path, and these towns that were in the path of the floodwaters. They were changed inexorably for the future, for the remainder of time. And again, this is how this show is so well put together, because you're covering all these different angles geographically while telling the story, and it's somewhat chronologically, but not necessarily.
It's not chronologically. So the conceit of this episode is it's a road trip, right? Yeah. And I mean, it was an actual road trip in that we actually did get on the road. We spent a night over, in Santa Paula.
Yeah.
And that helped us. So we wanted to do the story of the tragedy justice, right? And it's a serious, somber story, but we need, for half an hour, we needed to lighten it up a little bit. So in a respectful way, we were able to introduce this road trip element that kind of helped make the dark subject matter a little more approachable.
I loved it, to be honest. And I liked seeing you actually driving, which brought up its own set of questions for me. Like when you're actually driving in that episode, but which is cool. It did add a good element to it.
Yeah.
But
Well, thank you. No, I really appreciate you saying that. Yeah. Yeah. But so from the dam site, we follow the flood path.
Right.
And the flood initially, it went through that narrow San Francisco Canyon.
Yeah.
And when you walk up that canyon today, you can still see, bare rock, and where I'm sure the flood waters, because imagine the force that the water was carrying right through the, and it tore through the town that I think was then called Saugus, but today we know that it's like the Santa Clarita area, and wiped out a lot of settlements, and then went to the Santa Clara River Valley, which is the valley that Fillmore, Santa Paula, Ventura are along, all the way to the Pacific. And we followed that. We drove down that. I forget what it's 126, the highway.
I'm terrible. Ironically, I am terrible with directions and geography. But yes, there's definitely a highway that goes out that way.
And anybody can drive this. Anybody can do this. They can stop. They could start at the dam, and I recommend it. Right, it'll take you a few hours. That's it.
And this is the kind of thing, like with Lost L.A., it's like historical, not always a road trip, but you can trace the path physically as you're learning the history. And it's so important because, as always in L.A., we bulldoze our past because we're so focused on being the city of the future. So it's really important as a resource, as a future archive, that Lost L.A. exists and that you're creating this for the people. One of the things that I really appreciated about that episode, again, was when you were in I believe it was the part in Fillmore, and you were sitting with the archivist woman.
Yeah, Martha Gentry. Yeah, she's the executive director of that museum, the Fillmore. It's the Fillmore History Museum, I think.
And she pulled out the newspaper, La Voz de Colonia.
So that was actually, sorry, that was another person. That was Jose Alamillo. He's a professor at Cal State Channel Islands.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, so he pulls out, and it's the newspaper coverage of a community, a mostly immigrant community, because again, this is California going back a century. The migrant workers was a big part of the culture and the community, not in the spotlight, again, but kind of the heart and soul of how California has grown and continues to grow. But there were these newspaper articles that were saying like disaster in Spanish, like disaster, flood, inundation, injuries, deaths, and like massive, huge font. And I'm looking at these newspapers and it's like, dude, that's important historical records that in my mind have not come to light. And I actually looked online to see if I could. You can't get that. And that's an amazing, something that honestly gives me chills. I hate to, to sound corny, but like, to me, I am a newspaper guy, right?
Yeah,
First and foremost, I've talked about that. I have the Daily News and the LA Times today, physical copies with me because I subscribe to both papers still, because I think the newspaper is a very important piece of record. And I know that makes me a little archaic, but still.
No, it's the first draft of history.
It is the first draft of history, and often, maybe not quote unquote the most accurate, but at the time contemporaneously accurate as a reporting document. And it's so important to look to that as a resource. And I was just watching that and seeing the papers, and you're wondering what happened to that paper, what happened to that community. How are they even getting that paper out, at that time? And these are the kind of things that the show uncovers. And it's so important. So transitioning from there, tell me about Lost L.A. What do you think that the legacy is? This is its 8th or 7th season now, correct? Or completed 7 seasons. Is that?
Yeah. So this the season that's airing right now. That's our 7th. So we started. We took a couple years off for the pandemic. We started in January 2016. Okay. And the show's evolved a little bit over time, right? At first, it was more. If you've seen those, like the Dodger Stadium
I went
episode.
back on the first one. It's like reshaping LA, the topography, and like all that kind of stuff. But it has to evolve. Like it has to. But go on. Yeah. Let's start there then. What was the impetus for the show? How did that get started? 2016, you were a young buck, okay? So you were a young dude.
Yeah, not anymore.
you had I almost feel like doing a disservice calling it a blog. But what was Southland? Let's tell me what Southland was, and how did you go from there to writing these articles to becoming a historian, whether or not you're formally trained, that's what you are, to creating Lost L.A.?
Yeah. So the show started with those articles you were talking about. And back in the time, we used that term blog. Well, nobody says that anymore.
Right.
Blog.
That's why I feel like it's a concern, because it was so much more important than that. And it is what it was, but it was so much more than that. But go on.
Yeah. So that was for what was then called KCET, for their website. And I think the last time I counted, it was like 280, close to 300. Okay. So it was that many. But I covered a lot of ground. And then I did have a separate blog for what was Gizmodo. Yeah, and it was a subdomain. Interesting. My friend at the time was running. He was the editor in chief of that, and he thought, let's bring in a history, which is kind of outside the box thinking for a technology blog, but it was fun.
Good for them.
Yeah, and I also wrote for LA Magazine for a while. Right. So I was exploring all these different, but mainly it was the KCET articles where. The chief creative officer at the time, Juan Davies, he said, let's these are really popular.Ey're connecting with LA. They're resonating, especially with younger people. Let's make a TV show out of it, because it was a TV station, right? Wow. And they were, at the time, they were no longer with PBS, right? This was after they made their decision to leave PBS, and they were looking to create their own original programming. So it was a great opportunity. I just happened to be at the right place at the right time.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then, so what was the brainchild came from Juan Davies?
Yeah, it was Juan. I mean, we had a guy named Zach Behrens, who had been the editor-in-chief of LAist, and he went over right after KCT split with PBS, started heading up their blog operations. Okay. And so that's when I came on. He said, I want to have a writer desert. I want to have like an I want to have a desert writer, environment writer, and I want to have like a history writer. And why not history told through the archives? Yeah. So that's where I came in, and that's how that started. And Zach and I, we piloted some videos like about funiculars, and tried to make a series about trees. Yeah. And then we came out with something called like Monomania LA, which was about these obsessive collectors of LA history. So some guy who collected everything there is about the California orange. Ernie Marquez, who's unfortunately passed away a couple years ago, but he's descended. He was actually, his family held the land to Rancho Santa Monica or Boca de Santa Monica, something like that. But Santa Monica Canyon, it was originally this huge rancho that his great-great-grandfather had been granted from the Mexican government. Right. Unfortunately, the land that he had was reduced to just the family cemetery plot. But we went to the cemetery, interviewed. He's collected everything, documenting his family history.
Is that the Marquez Cemetery? That's in Santa Monica?
If it's in Santa Monica Canyon,
it's behind like these big time homes, like it's in like a wealthy neighborhood. Yeah. I've wanted to do an episode on that for the long. So you were there. I
was there with him. Yeah,
always following in his footsteps. I'm telling you. Yeah. But what was that like, by the way? Sorry,
it was tangent, but it was amazing. I mean, because it was just a labor of love for him, right? He wanted to honor his ancestors, his family. They had to do, a lot of the graves were not marked, so he did bring in people who did like ground penetrating radar to figure out where the graves were. Cow. He tried to maintain it as well as he could, even though he was well into his 90s. Yeah. Right. Yeah, that was a powerful visit there.
Oh, man.
That was all before Lost L.A.
Yes. Okay, so let's get back to that because again, I could spend time on that because that's something I've been wanting to cover and just haven't got to.
Go there
go
for
on.
sure.
So you're doing the funicular and the pilots and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Santa Monica Canyon. Yeah. Collectors.
Yeah. So we'd already proved that we could take these blog posts or these articles and turn them into video content. But so then Juan came along and said, well, let's package them into a TV show. And so that was the first season of Lost L.A. It was more documentary style storytelling, straight documentary with talking heads.
A little more traditional.
Yeah. And that was the first 2 seasons. And then the third season, we introduced this sort of travelogue element into it where it was more of a hosted program where I was on screen more, talking to people, interviewing them. Right. I got to do my favorite episode there when we went to Yosemite. Which was a dream.
Your favorite, but that's always an unfair question because you've covered so much. But that one really is your favorite.
It has to be, yeah. I mean, because Yosemite is one of my favorite places on Earth. We tried to focus on Yosemite's connections to LA, and it turns out there are a lot of them, right?
Of course,
a lot of the Rangers had background in LA. There was this famous riot in the 1960s called the Stoneman Meadow riot, where
in Yosemite,
there were a bunch of hippies camped out on Stoneman Meadow, degrading this fragile ecosystem, this meadow ecosystem, and eventually the park rangers on horseback came in and evicted them forcefully, with their billy clubs or whatever.
Yeah, different era.
Yeah, sure. But there was a filmmaker on site who documented all this, and he was from LA. It turns out the PIO, the guy who's in charge of like public affairs for Yosemite, he's from LA. So there are all these cool LA connections that we're able to highlight.
That's pretty sweet. Okay. So let's go through the mechanics of the show though. So you're doing these pre-pilot episodes, right? Had you had any experience with video, with making episode? No. It was just on the fly. How big was the team and everything back then?
Are we talking about like the first season?
Well, before the first season, before it became Lost L.A., let's say.
Oh, yeah. Like when we were doing these, like we did a video about Angel's Flight, for instance. Yeah. That was a small team. I think we had a camera operator, sound guy. It was me and Zach. That might have been it. I mean, we're still a small team. Like when we go out on location, we can be pretty nimble. We're probably a team of 10, right? We have travel with 2 or 3 cameras. We have, a couple producers, maybe a production coordinator. Small team. Yeah. Yeah.
That's interesting. Okay. So then it turns into Lost L.A. First season was well received. What was the feedback? What were you guys feeling? How did you know, to keep going, really?
Yeah, the feedback was really good, right? Back then, linear television viewing was a lot more important than it is today. It's still important, but so like the Nielsen ratings were pretty good.
It's not that long. It was so not even that
less than 10 years ago.
Everything's changed. Okay, go on.
Yeah. So the Nielsen ratings were pretty good. Word of mouth was good. Did the digital engagement, I guess you'd call it. Thankfully we found funding. That first season was basically all, we got seed money from our dean at the USC libraries. Awesome. And after that, we found outside funding to keep it going. And somehow, by sheer luck, maybe, or somehow we've kept it going the whole time.
I want to take a sidebar on the funding because, again, Ralph M. Parsons Foundation and the LA County Board of Supervisors through the Department of Arts and Culture and Creative Recovery, LA, and other generous institutional funders. Yeah. How difficult is that process of getting funding? Because, again, this really is public access, right? Like public, right. I mean, I'm sure that's not the term. Like,
public broadcasting.
Public broadcasting. Yeah. How difficult is that? How does that relationship work? And are you out there pounding the pavement or is this done above your pay grade?
It's way above my pay grade. Thankfully, PBS SoCal has a great team.
Right.
Working for underwriting, corporate sponsors, foundation support. Yeah, this latest season, I think the Anne Ray Foundation has been given. Yeah. So thankfully I have nothing to do with that because I'd probably be pretty bad at it.
Because I was going to say, that's going to take so much just time and effort, we're worrying about that. And thank you, by the way, to those generous sponsors because it's so important to have programming like this. When do you think Lost L.A. Caught its stride?
It was our 4th season, so it took us a while. It really is how it goes. Yeah, so that's like halfway through our current run. 2019, we that was when our showrunner, Angela Boisvert, came on, and she's been running this ship. She's been captaining this ship ever since. We also brought on our director / DP, a guy named Matt Bass.
Okay.
And that our production crew, sort of the same nucleus that we had back in 2019, is still with us today. So we're a great team, and I love working with these people. That's when we really figured, so we had the right people, but we also figured out the concept. We figured out that we wanted to ground each story in an archive, try to visit an archive if we can.
Yeah.
And ideally, each story will start by, we're investigating this archival object, and the story just sort of unfolds from it, right? So for instance, our Manzanar episode where we went up to Manzanar, there was a photo at the UCLA library, the special collections of the UCLA library. It was a photo that Ansel Adams took of the Manzanar Relocation Center. Right. And on the back, there was this hard to decipher handwriting. Yeah. And it turns out that that everything Ansel Adams photographed there was censored, right? The government had to approve everything for release. Wow. But we decided to go on this journey outside to Manzanar to figure out what this writing meant, to figure out who photographed Manzanar, what their cameras captured, how their cameras captured the scene differently. Because there was Ansel Adams, but there was also one of the prisoners there, Toyo Miyatake, who smuggled in like a camera lens and took some of the most stunning photographs of and heartbreaking photographs of the camp.
So is that the episode you're saying that you guys were like, this is the one, we figured it out. This is going to be the model.
Exactly. Yeah. And then we just, ever since we've been trying to replicate that.
Wow. Yeah. And then, all right, take me through the conceptualization, right? Like you have a new season, you got to have 1,000 ideas, right? Because again, there's so much awesome things and historical factoids and stories and directions you could go. What is the process? Is it a brainstorming? Like these are the big things. You limit it down to this amount. You guys all have a big group. Like these are going to be the 4 for the next season. How does that work?
Yeah, it's a big brainstorming session. You're right. We start with hundreds. In the early days, we were a little more indiscriminate. It was, these are the big stories in LA history. Let's try to do one of these. And today, as we learn from experience, grounding these stories in like an archive matters. We try to have things that we can. We actually try to start with like an archival collection, right? Like something, for instance, this awesome archive from the Olive View Sanitarium, the tuberculosis sanatorium in the Valley, and what kind of story could that tell? Okay, or the menu collection at the LA Public Library,
that's a fun one.
A collection of tiki bar menus. What kind of story could we tell from that?
And you balance fun with serious and a little bit more weighty, and that kind of goes into creating the season, right?
Yeah, I mean, we have to think about what stories we want to tell, but we also have to think about what stories our viewers want to see, right? So it's a hard process, and sometimes it's funny. Like we just did that Tiki episode, season 6, but I think that had been on our list for maybe since the very beginning of the show. We wanted to do a Tiki episode, and we finally figured out how to do it.
Wow. Yeah. And do you do the writing? How does the writing?
It's not, so they're not actually scripted, but we do have things called scripts, right?
Right. There's a little voiceover element that needs to be scripted. Come on.
The voiceover I write. Okay, yes. Yeah. I write that. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, one season we had another person, but usually I write it. But the scripts, the voiceover is not the important part. The important part is structuring the episode, deciding where we're going to go, who we're going to talk to, what we're going to hear from this interview. And a lot of that work is done by the showrunner I mentioned, Angela Boisvert, but we also, sometimes we bring in consulting producers or outside producers. So we had a couple producers work on this last season. Yeah. It's a big team effort though. The scripts come out of our twice weekly meetings where we talk about, this is what we're finding in the archive. This is kind of what we're finding in our research, because we read a lot too, right? Yeah, we decide what sort of story we want to tell, and that finds its way on the page, and then we go out and shoot it. Yeah. It's not always what's on the page.
Of course not.
Of course not.
Things change, man, as you're working in real time on a lot of stuff. does the research, and how much research are you doing? And of course, I know that you're a research master, but again, in your role today, are you doing much of the research, or is it the team?
Not anymore. I used to do the bulk of it.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, and today, I pitch in when I can, but we have a dedicated team of two researchers. Sweet. I should give them shout outs. Anne-Marie Maxwell, Michaela Rogers.
I want to give them double shout outs. Did you say the names again?
Anne-Marie Maxwell, Michaela Rogers.
Okay. Thank you for your research, because I have to tell you, as much as I love doing research, when you're doing abundant research over and over and over, it can be mind numbing, because I know you're looking for the perfect thing. You find things that are close, especially with images and your guys' videos and everything, combing through all that. Find something that's close. You're like, I could use this, but I know there's got to be something better or more representative. And it's really, sometimes I'm sitting there just looking for something that I know has to exist, but does it really? And again, it's a really difficult and valuable process, especially because the visual archives are what resonates, at least for somebody like me, and I imagine a lot of your viewers, that when you see those images and those videos and those records, like that's what really, where you connect. I mean, I like seeing Nathan's face, of course, but like, you know, like I said, with the old newspapers.
It's the research that really sets it apart. And you know, so Anne-Marie is a seasoned exhibitions curator, and Michaela is actually a formally trained librarian, with a specialty in special collections. So they actually go out and visit these archives and do the kind of research that historians do. We're doing original primary source research here for these episodes, and so that's why we're able to sort of make these fresh discoveries and bring new angles to stories that have been told a lot, right? Yeah. And then also source just the most amazing images to put up on the screen.
How long does an episode take to put together?
Roughly a year.
Wow.
You know? I mean, we start work on it a year out. Yeah.
It shows, man. Yeah. Again, they're so thorough and inspirational. And honestly, I'm combing through your archive. Like I said, I binged like this week, and I'm just combing through. I'm like, I got to cover this. I got to do this. And now I'm going to have cliff notes and shortcuts if I use it. No. So let's get into Nathan Masters, the background. How did you become this guy? And I got to say something. Yeah. I saw you were born in Anaheim.
Yeah, born in Orange County.
Raised in Orange County. So how did you get to be such an LA guy? Tell me about that background, and where did the infatuation, for lack of a better word, with LA sort of come into play?
Yeah, I mean, Orange County is not. I mean, it's not the sticks, right? We're sort of close to LA. It's separate though.
And worth saying, Orange County used to be part of Los Angeles. Right?
Originally, yeah. LA County was at the very beginning when it was incorporated. Yeah, LA County had. I think it included everything but like San Diego and the South. Yes, it was
massive. Yeah. But the reason why Orange County, why I kind of put that asterisk, is because there's this so-called orange curtain that both sides kind of observe or acknowledge, and it's like Orange County, like LA, like so. Okay,
yeah.
And as a kid, you're not thinking like that, of course, right?
No, and I mean we were talking pre-taping. You know, I grew up a Dodgers fan, even though I lived probably 2 miles from Anaheim Stadium. Okay, I was never into the Angels. My dad was a Dodger fan when he moved to Orange County. He moved to Orange County, you know, before the Angels were there, right? You know, my family goes back almost 100 years in LA. Awesome. So, you know, we have family roots here. My grandfather came out, he was a baby sitting on his mom's lap, taking a train from Minnesota during the Depression. And they moved to Bell Gardens, which they called Billy Goat Acres at the time. I don't know if people still use that.
You're kidding me.
Yeah.
That's cool. That's a great factoid. Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, I have a lot of family history here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess for me, the orange curtain, I didn't really see it that much, and that is something that developed maybe the 1950s, where Orange County tried to carve out its own identity. Like the Santa Ana Register changed its name to the Orange County Register, which I think is a significant change.
That's interesting too.
Eventually, you know, the Angels changed their name to the Anaheim Angels, and famously
California Angels and Los Angeles, right?
But this sort of, I don't want to call it a rivalry, but the dispute over Orange County's association with LA, you can see that's at the heart of this uproar over the Angel's name, right? Right, because a lot of people in Orange County don't want to consider themselves part of LA, and LA is like, well, it's not.
Yeah, like really, come on, yeah. So, but okay. So, getting your upbringing, like high school, what kind of student were you? Were you always interested in the history? Were you doing this research? Was that
so? You know what? I don't really know where this fascination with history came from. It might have been Back to the Future.
Get out of here.
Which also shot in LA County, right? Yep. I was always fascinated by. Especially just seeing Marty in the DeLorean, driving through what it was at the mall. It's the Puente Hills Mall. Right,
Mall,
right.
Absolutely.
And then all of a sudden it becomes farmland. And I think that at an early age that got my mind going about everything used to look different. Everything used to be different. And I was always just sort of curious about that. Yeah. Never really engaged with that in high school or even college. It was really, okay, right. Yeah.
And you went to USC, right?
No, I went to UC Irvine.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So UC Irvine, you are a student. What were you majoring in?
Political science.
What did you think you wanted
to be?
A lawyer. You wanted to be a lawyer?
I wanted to be a lawyer.
I had a brief moment where I wanted to be a lawyer too. I went to a long government magnet high school, and a lot of my friends ended up becoming attorneys, and not too many of them were happy with that lifestyle, although the pay in theory was kind of the motivation going in. So,
but I have a lot of lawyer friends too. It's various degrees of satisfaction with that career choice.
Right. Okay, so you're at UC Irvine, majoring in poli-sci, and then what? Where was the spark? Where was the spark lit? And how did you get into this? And how did Southland, KCET, writing, all that start?
It's books, right? It's book. I mean, not this one, but
read that one though. By the way, DJ Waldy, you also got to hang out with.
Oh yeah. Dude.
I mean,
we go way back actually, because actually a lot of the pieces in here I helped edit. Because a lot of them were originally published on the KCET website.
Get out of
here. That was a couple of them I even suggested. But so was his book Holy Land.
Hold on, can we hold this up again?
Oh yeah,
real quick?
Everybody.
So
should
DJ
see,
Waldy, and I'm glad you said this because DJ Waldy inspired me. Holy Land. I had no clue about Lakewood. I've called it the most influential city in the world history. Like literally overnight, like we see tract housing, we see these kind of planned communities. That was the first one that really worked. And what's funny is you go to Lakewood today, and it still has, and it's definitely a neighborhood and a community, but it still has that feel where you're like, I can see this, how this came about. But DJ Waldy wrote this book, and he's a man who's legally blind, and he had to walk. So his whole life is based on these observations, these really keen, like detail, the sidewalk. Like he was the first person who like turned me on to like, the sidewalks are different. Why are these names etched into the sidewalk? What does that even mean? And what's the significance? The curbs, the streetlights, all this stuff that he had this relationship with because he wasn't in a car. And even though I'm like a huge LA, I'm a car guy. We've talked about this, yay, mass transit, love it, respect it. But anyway, but he had this different perspective, and Holy Land was this book just about Lakewood and the development, and go on, take.
Yeah, I mean, bigger than just Lakewood too. It gets into all LA, how the street grids are oriented, how the land was parceled up. It's fascinating. It's poetic, right? It's almost poetry, and you're right. So he walked to work every day. He worked for the city of Lakewood for a long time, and he told me, I thought this was interesting. He told me that he would, Holy Land is just basically a series of short chapters, right? Yeah. Maybe, I don't know, like 400 words.
So easy to read, by the way, and so is Becoming Los Angeles. And again, for people with like shorter attention spans or, I don't love to read, these are books that you can just like pick up and just power through. But go on, right.
Well, so he actually, he was explaining to me that he composed every little chapter in Holy Land on his walk to work. That's why they're kind of short. He says he's like a slow writer, but which I mean, I am too, my God. Right. But he would so that's why they're all that length, because that was long enough for him to understand what the beginning, middle, end is, maybe come up with some key. And I've actually tried that trick myself, and it really works, super right? Cool. Yeah. And then you can always stitch them together. Yeah. But any fan of LA in a minute, any fan of Lost L.A. should have Holy Land.
Oh my God. And Becoming Los Angeles, which again isn't as much of a narrative as Holy Land is. It's mostly a collection of essays, short stories, articles that I guess some were edited by Nathan Masters. So get into that. You were reading, and this is what inspired me as well. But
DJ Waldy. I mean, fiction like Raymond Chandler's. Everybody should have at least The Big Sleep or whatever. Okay. Right here, Kevin Starr, who actually ended up becoming a mentor of mine. He was my first professor in grad school.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, because he was at USC, right?
And you did go to USC grad school. I knew there was some USC bona fides here, other than professional. Yeah.
And then of course, like the book that shaped a lot of people's thinking about LA history was City of Quartz, the Mike Davis book, just a classic.
So my Soc 1 class at UCLA, I will never forget, it was called Sociology of Los Angeles, right? And I was not a scholastic kid when I was in college. I always could get good grades and do well on the test, but I hate to say it, I wasn't as interested in the learning part. I was like, I know how to play the game, right? Get good grades. Now let me go party and have some fun, like truthfully. But Soc 1, I was like, oh, Sociology of Los Angeles, that sounds interesting. I had no idea what it was. City of Quartz, of course, was like the main text. And boom, then you're like, oh my God, this opens up your mind to just a different way of thinking and seeing Los Angeles and all these kind of elements that I hadn't thought about, philosophically, politically, sociologically. But okay, so City of Quartz, go on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, City of Quartz, just you read that and you're like, wow, like this is, I'm kind of getting a sense of the real LA.
Yeah.
And there's one other book I should mention, which is Carrie McWilliams. This is an old classic, Southern California, Island on the Land.
Yes.
Which is like probably the standard text for the history of Southern California up till, I don't know, where does it end? Around 1930s, 40s? Yeah. So much fascinating stuff. He was the one who covered, that was, newspapers are the first draft. Yeah. He wrote the second, and then everybody else has been working on the third. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, okay. So you're reading these books. You're like, wow, Los Angeles, blah, blah.
Yeah.
How does that turn into you writing pieces? And what was the first thing you ever wrote that was published?
Well, I guess the first was, I forget what it was. It was something, I think it was like Roses, Oranges, and the Amazing Summerland. It was about the Southern California boosters who tried to promote LA to the rest of the world. These images of sunshine and citrus groves
and health and rejuvenating your health. And
all
this kind of stuff.
Yeah. That was the first blog post for KCET. And originally we were conceiving of it as more as like a little slideshow with some writing, and eventually the writing grew a little bit more substantial.
But how had you hooked up at KCET then? At that point,
that was when I was at USC, and that was Zach Behrens reached out to us at the libraries. We through this organization, LA is Subject, which is actually what the blog was called originally. And LA Subjects is this other, maybe it's a bit of a tangent, but it goes back to the mid 90s. The idea was to partner to bring these small community archives, private collectors who have amazingly important materials like in their attics or garages, to bring them together with big institutional collectors like libraries and museums, and try to bring to light some of the neglected or marginalized stories from LA. So that's an organization that's hosted at USC. That was how the connection was made. And I was a guy who had been reading all these books, was really into the history. So again, I was just at the right place at the right time. Like, hey, Nathan, why don't you take this on?
Were you a writer though? Were you?
I've always wanted to. Yeah, I've always kind of fancied myself a writer.
There you go. Okay, so then this Roses and historical. What did you say he's called?
I don't even really remember what it was.
So that gets the ball rolling, and then they're like, do another one. Let's keep them going.
And 200 weeks later or whatever, it became Lost L.A.
And did that become, when you were doing the writing, what did that consume you? Let's start there. Like, what was your relationship with that? Because I just know, speaking first, from me doing LA a Minute, like you jump into it and then you're like, wait, now I got to do another one. And it's funny with Becoming Los Angeles or all these books, I'm always like taking these notes. I'm a dog ear page guy, by the way. I know some people it makes them cringe. I apologize. I love it. Anyway, point is, but I'm like, I got to go back to this. Now I got to do a story on this. And then, you're kind of prioritizing which one do I want to do first, all the research. It consumed me, and I became obsessed. Was there a little bit of that?
Yeah. Consuming is a good way to describe it. Yeah, it did. It took over my work week for sure. Yes. I remember every week, at least one, maybe 2 days a week, I was staying late in the office working on these things. It was a labor of love. I was getting really into it. And yeah, I'm glad I've been able to pursue this professionally now.
Do you still do a lot of writing aside from, and I can't believe I didn't mention at the beginning, your friggin' book,
Oh yeah,
Crooked, about the Teapot Dome, which again, how do we even address that whole let's talk about the book. Okay. So he is also a published, accomplished author, and the book is called Crooked. What's the sub? Like, how does it, I have what it's about. It's about the Teapot Dome, the presidential scandal that would define political scandal for 50 years. But the book is called Crooked. Yeah.
Yeah. It's about at the time of writing, the most corrupt attorney general in U.S. history. Yeah. And the Maverick senator who took him on
at the time of writing.
Just leave that go on. Okay. I won't explain that, but and it was a roaring 20s scandal. I mean, there was this attorney general who was basically, he was taking bribes. He was taking bribes in return for, say, like pardons or liquor certificates to let bootleggers distribute whiskey legally. And this junior senator from Montana kind of caught onto this, started investigating him. And then that senator found himself in the legal crosshairs of the Justice Department. And when I came across that story, I thought, that's an interesting book. Seems kind of timely.
How did you get into the book writing business? Why did that come about?
Well, of course, if you consider yourself a writer, you always want to eventually publish a book, usually. Right. So I'd always had that as a goal. And I mean, I'd recently married, my wife, who is an author. She published a book in 2014, and she's a terrific writer, and she'd been kind of encouraging me to get a book out there. Wow. And so the obvious choice would have been to do something about LA, right? Given everything, but I kind of just wanted a little change of scenery because I was still doing Lost L.A. Wow, and I wanted to challenge myself too. Yeah. So like, why not write about a Washington scandal from the 1920s?
Didn't that kind of have some effects in Los Angeles and people were involved? I mean, I'm conflating things, but Doheny was.
Doheny was one of the principals.
Okay. Just making sure. Yeah, right. And he's it's an LA book. As far as I'm concerned, it's an LA book. No, go on.
Yeah, I mean, he's a character in the book. Yeah, so Doheny was an LA-based. He called himself an oil man, right? I mean, he was the inspiration for Daniel Plainview in There Will Be Blood.
Oh my God, one of my favorite movies. Yes, right, correct.
And he was one of the, for lack of a better word, criminals involved in this Teapot Dome scandal, where he or his son actually withdrew $100,000 in cash, which at the time was a fortune, right? Yeah. Put it in a black satchel and gave it to the Secretary of the Interior in return for his father getting rights to a government oil field. That's the Teapot Dome in a nutshell. And that was all. And Doheny, of course, famously based in LA. In fact, the library that I work in is named after Doheny Jr., the man who put the money in the satchel and then was famously murdered at his mansion in Beverly Hills.
Man, Doheny is another polarizing figure in Los Angeles history as well. Yeah, so influential, polarizing. Is writing a book like birthing a baby? That's what I've heard.
Yeah. I mean, that's funny you mentioned that because it just takes a long time, actually. I mean, it's a lot more than 9 months or whatever. I mean, I started working on that book, 2019, and then it finally came out. Right after I turned in the final manuscript a week before my second child was born. Right. So it was, I had 2 children in the time or my wife had 2 children at the time that it took to write that book.
Wow. Yeah. And what did it feel like, by the way, when the thing got published? What did you feel like?
Oh, it was, I mean, amazing accomplishment personally. Yes. And then really what really made me feel good was last year it won the Edgar Award, which from the Mystery Writers of America, which is, like Michael Connolly, one of your previous guests, he was the president of that for a while. And famously, the first president of that organization was this obscure LA writer named Raymond Chandler. So it was a real honor to win that. I have that up there with like our LA area Emmys.
Does an Edgar? Do they give you something? Like, is it a physical?
They give you a statue, like a bust of Edgar Allan Poe, because it's named after Poe. Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that.
I got
That's
some,
awesome.
so that happened in New York, and I got some funny looks from the TSA agents at the airport.
Oh man.
They showed it to me on the screen. Like, what?
That's a weird one, right? But good job. Are there any books upcoming, or is that something in your future plans?
Yeah. I'm working on one now. It's with I don't want to jinx it, so I won't talk too much about it. But
fair.
it's my agent just sent it out to a bunch of editors shopping it around.
Excited?
Yeah, really
Is it
excited.
LA oriented?
It's not LA oriented.
Oh, come on.
No. But I have a little fiction project I've been working on that is LA oriented. So,
Really?
yeah.
Fiction writer, huh?
Why not? Right?
Okay. I never had the imagination, man. Like that creative writing from that capacity, just not my style. But I mean, not my style. I just never really endeavored to do that. Okay, so we're wrapping up a little bit. I got to talk about some LA stuff.
Yeah.
Let's talk about LA neighborhoods. You mentioned you used to live in Highland Park.
Yep. Yeah.
Highland Park is one of my favorite neighborhoods. It's definitely evolved over the years, over the generations, but really has some good history from Bob Baker to Highland Park Bowl and just walking down York and all that. What you lived there, so I got to imagine it's one of your favorite neighborhoods there in LA. What are some other neighborhoods that you like?
Well, I've also lived downtown.
Yeah. Which is always
I
interesting.
have a love-hate relationship with downtown.
I think we all do. I think we all do. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, downhill has had its ups and downs, right?
Yeah.
It was on the upswing when I was there. And that was when I was single, didn't have kids. It was a good time to be doing
Different
that.
era. Yeah.
I wouldn't take my kids walking through downtown, most parts of downtown right now.
Can we talk? I was going to do an episode on downtown LA, and I was going to call it the end of the downtown LA rebirth.
Yeah.
Because I feel like, as you said, and I trace this timeline. My dad's an LA native, loves LA, took us all around LA. He had a boxing gym at 108th and Broadway in South LA. We go to El Tepeyac, Boyle Heights, bring home Manuel's burrito for our neighbors. My mom loved Venice, Griffith, all over LA. But when I first started dating my current wife and we go to downtown, he'd be like, why are you going downtown? There's nothing there. And this is the turn of the 21st century. So it wasn't quite what I was like, no, Dad, it's like building up, like blah, blah, blah. And it did. And it started to like kind of take off and get excited. Restaurants and bars, a little bit walkable, but always, it wasn't as walkable as people maybe wanted because there were blocks. There were just like zones of like, maybe I shouldn't walk. But it was going, it was on the upswing. And like you said, it was happening. It was great. Rooftops, all this kind of stuff. And then COVID just kind of was, I don't want to call it the death knell because I don't want to write it off, but I feel that period of where downtown LA was really having this renaissance. And I was excited, like we have a downtown, because people would make fun of LA's, outsiders would make fun of LA's downtown. Like, no, downtown's cool, man. We're gonna hang out downtown. And then it kind of like hit that wall, right? Like,
I think it was COVID, and then the hangover from COVID, remote work, now the low occupancy rates in all the office towers. Downtown was only able to sustain a residential population because it had this huge full-time work week population. And now that it's what has it been cut in half, it's just a lot harder for these businesses to stay open. Man,
it's a shame. And again, I'm from the camp of, LA is so geographically spread out, and, Pomona to Palisades, Silmar to San Pedro. There's a lot of ground to cover. So we don't quote unquote need a lively downtown, but it sure helps. And it's exciting when there is a downtown. What are some other neighborhoods that you enjoy?
This is not LA. Does it have to be within the city limits? No. So I actually love Pasadena.
Okay.
Another place I've lived. I love, and when when I can, I make my way out to Vroman's. It's my favorite bookstore anywhere. It's where I did my book launch, and I was so happy to do that there.
That's cool.
It's the oldest bookstore it's definitely the oldest bookstore. Well, one of the oldest bookstores in Southern California. I think it's.
Really?
Yeah. How long? 1890s, I think.
Holy cow!
It's been there for.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Okay. Future episode for Romans. By the way, that's actually awesome.
Yeah.
Soon episode.
Yeah. I have nothing against it, but I just don't like the West Side for how long it takes to get there. Whenever somebody wants to meet up in like Venice, I'm like, oh God, that drive.
Listen, I grew up. I'm a UCLA guy. So I was like default West Side, if you will. Even though UCLA is not like West Side, but like that's the natural kind of funnel over there.
Yeah.
Love Santa Monica, love Venice, Marina Del Rey. There's a lot of great communities over there. And but I'm never in a rush. It's the same thing to get over there because you're like, once you're there, you're there. And then like getting out is a whole hassle and all this kind of stuff. So that's interesting. Nothing against the West Side.
Nothing against it.
Once you're there, you're kind of locked.
Yeah.
Like it's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, food. Any LA food that you look forward to or that you love?
Yeah, this isn't on brand for me, but I really love Masa of Echo Park. Amazing Chicago deep dish pizza.
Okay.
I'm going to have some tonight with some friends. Yeah.
I got Gino's East out here in the Valley that does.
Is there a Gino's East out here?
Dude, it's the only approved one outside of Chicago. I forget the relationship. It's brothers or cousins or something of the actual. But it's legit. I'm going there next Monday, actually. In fact, baseball coaches meeting. So that's a good Chicago deep dish. Gino's East in they're technically Sherman Oaks, I believe. So it's like it's Sherman Oaks, Studio City border. Okay, give me your ideal day in LA. One thing to do in LA. You have you and the wife and or the kids. Maybe a day without the kids or with whatever you prefer. What do you do in LA? What do you want to see?
Yeah, I'll bring in something from this latest season of Lost L.A. Not in LA, but in Downey.
Hey,
there's the former site of the Rockwell, the North American Rockwell International plant where they built like the Apollo command module. They built the space or they designed and mostly built the space shuttle there.
Yeah.
Most of that's now like big box stores, but there is a memorial to there's a museum, like a hands-on museum for kids. So if I were to bring the kids, I want to bring them out there. It's called the Columbia Memorial Space Center, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's on that former site. We actually shot a scene there with some of the old Rockwell engineers, which was really cool. If you don't have kids, I've already mentioned this too.
Yeah.
Lake Hollywood, the Hollywood Reservoir. That's just a great way to start the day. Go for a run around there. You have a lot of shade, the pine trees. You'll see deer. I mean, it's you feel like you're above the city, but you feel like you're not really in it. It's
cool.
Yeah. That's definitely part of the perfect day.
Okay, and then closing out, I got a couple tougher questions. Not tougher, but. You mentioned the Yosemite episode.
Yeah.
What are some episodes that you've done that are I personally don't like being asked this question, so I feel bad while asking you. But what are some of your favorite that you've done or things that you've uncovered maybe that you didn't know that when you were there filming, you're like, this is truly amazing. Like it really touched you or moved you.
Yeah. Well, the St. Francis Dam, I have to include that. Like just the being at the dam site with the experts, but also visiting these communities.
Right.
Personally, just one of the funnest ones to make was the tiki episode. I learned how to. I went to the Tiki Tea, and they taught me how to make a zombie. Not the original Don the Beachcomber zombie, but that was really fun to get behind the bar. I have no bartending experience, but they taught me all the tricks.
Are you a tiki guy?
No, I'm not a tiki guy. Although it's funny, like since that episode, I've started making tiki drinks at home for my wife, who just she discovered that she likes a Mai Tai. So,
okay.
I have a well-stocked bar full of rum and orgeat syrup and all that stuff. Yeah. I don't know. Going back.
How about this? Let me change it a little bit. Some things that are misunderstood about LA, even people in Los Angeles.
Yeah. Okay. So we already mentioned Mulholland, right? Dodger Stadium's just so much more complicated than a lot of people think, right? If you really dig into it, they're really, with the exception maybe of a couple families, most people were not evicted to make way for the Dodgers, right? And these were people who had been staying there long after most residents had left, right? The community was actually demolished to make way for a public housing project, and these people were going to be invited to return and live in Neutra, Richard Neutra designed public housing project. And then of course the Red Scare hit and public housing became a pinky or red thing. And so the project was killed, and the land was mostly, lying fallow for a while. And then they gave it to Walter O'Malley to build Dodger Stadium. It's just, there's a lot more nuance to the story than the way it's often told, as I'm sure you've encountered.
Man, Stealing Home is a great book on the whole story and the saga with Dodgers. So that's something that's interesting for you. Okay, so what is next for Nathan Masters? What are you guys doing besides working on the next season of Lost L.A.?
Yeah, we do have the next season of Lost L.A. I mean, working on this book that I said I didn't want to talk about. why don't I just say what we did yesterday? We shot this amazing segment. It's going to be a standalone segment. It's not going to be part of an episode at your alma mater, UCLA, the birthplace of the internet. There's this room in Bolter, or as I learned, Belter Hall is how you call it.
Crazy. As an alum, I did not know this. Belter Hall. It's spelled like Bolter, but it's Belter. Okay, go on.
But October 29th, 1969, the first message on the ARPANET, which we today know as the internet, was sent between UCLA and the Stanford Research Institute. And actually, they were trying to log on from the UCLA computer onto the Stanford computer. Tried to type login. They got to the L, they got to the O, and then when they typed the G, the Stanford computer crashed. So the first internet transmission ever was low.
Right.
And I spoke to Professor Kleinrock there, Leonard Kleinrock.
Oh, you actually got to meet Kleinrock.
Yeah.
He's like the guy.
He's the guy,
Okay.
So he later changed low to like lo and behold, right? It's like a nice poetic, prophetic message. Because if you think about it, like the first telegraph message, well, the one that we remember as the first telegraph message, Samuel Morse said, "What hath God wrought?" Right. So you think the first internet message should be something equally profound, right? And so he changed it to "Lo and Behold," which I think it works.
It does.
And then Werner Herzog named his documentary after that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Wow, that's incredible. So listen, PBS SoCal, check out Lost L.A. or do what I did and just go online and binge all of them because they're all excellent historical. Not just archives, but Nathan had so much personality to it, and they're well put together and entertaining. And honestly, like I want to see all of them. I made it through probably like 9 episodes last night, but but we got to make sure you're watching this. PBS SoCal. Where else can they find you?
You can find me on Instagram, I guess. I'm not very active, really, but Instagram,
I noticed that. Because you're always active in real life, actually doing stuff.
Yeah. So PBS SoCal. There's the PBS app. You can get our episodes. We also throw them all up on YouTube because we're public television. Why not make them freely available? They can always find my book too, Crooked.
There you go. Get Crooked. I need to get that. Honestly, apologies for not having it right here on the desk, and especially because I would have wanted you to autograph it. In fact, so we'll have to do this again
next time.
But Nathan, thank you for what you do. Again, thank you for coming in, but thank you for what you do. And as I said at the beginning, I went from being like so jealous to being in awe of because you do it so well. You're well spoken, you're charismatic, you're photogenic, knowledgeable, and you make it so entertaining and fun. And even the things that I've researched that I think, I know about this. That same Francis Dam. I got the episode and people told me, I never heard about that. But I'm watching and I'm like, damn, this is great. Like so much information and put together. It's such a friendly, welcoming package, man. And it's so important for Los Angeles to keep moving that forward, looking at our past, looking at our history, and looking at our culture. And you are a torchbearer of that. So I want to thank you.
Well, thank you. That means a lot to me. But I think I made it clear there's a big team behind this. And I just really try to act as like the proxy for the viewer, right? I just try to take the viewer on this journey as the host. It's not about me, right? It's about the history and
true. This amazing place that we live in called Los Angeles. So Nathan Masters, Lost L.A., PBS SoCal. Follow him at Nathan Masters. Anyway, he's not that active, but still a good feed. He puts up quality stuff. Get his book, Crooked. And thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. Share, like, subscribe. You know the deal. But Nathan, thank you so much. Really appreciate this. And stay tuned and make sure you watch Lost L.A. I'm telling you, it is absolutely excellent. It's on tonight and every night that you want it on PBS SoCal or on YouTube. All right, y'all. It's been a minute.